Hi, this is a demonstration of how to. It's basically a walkthrough of how to set up our Kerberos server and also LDAP, and I'm following my own instruction, which is partially faulty, I found out. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. This is the virtual machine of the KRB, but let me just go ahead and close this first, so we start from scratch. Okay. So we are following these steps here. This is the Kerberos assignment, and this is a two-parter. This assignment is a two-parter. The first part is to install Kerberos first, and then the second part is to install LDAP and Kerberos. And the first thing I have to do is to make sure that I change the due date of this so that we can turn it in at the right time. Okay. And today is the 5th. We'll have a week to do that. So add 7 to it. It's the 12th. And we'll save and display. Alright, so this is the instruction for the KRB SVR assignment. The first thing you have to do is to get the file. You can go ahead and just click this, or you can also, if you click this, it will try to download and put it into your local machine, and then you have to upload it, then you have to decompress it and stuff like that, which works too. So I'll just go ahead and download it, and there's one version downloaded already, so I'll go ahead and overwrite that version. So we'll click Save and Replace. This will take a little bit of time because it is a 405 megabyte file. When you do this at school, it won't take nearly as long because power is just running in the back room of room 152D. Well, not 152D, but the back room of 152. And I think the network is connected using fairly high-speed switches, so it won't take nearly as long. After we download that file, we'll go ahead and run our usual command line here. So before you do that, this is a good time, since we have 2 minutes left here. It's a good time to double check on a few things. And before we do anything else, let me change the font size of this terminal, just so that it's easier to read when you look at this from YouTube. So we'll change back to 12 point, and then we have to resize the monitor, resize the terminal itself. I think that's a good size right there. Okay, and I'll go ahead and remove the folder that I have used a little bit earlier. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is to make sure that VDE is running. And in this particular case, we don't really need to use the DHCP because we can use static IP instead. So it's entirely up to you to decide how you want to do it. I already have things running already. So one way to find out what kind of programs or services are running in the background already is to use PS. Now PS can take a really big variety of options. The one combination that I find is the most useful is uppercase A followed by lowercase f, and you can pipe it to less to make it easier to view. So once you pipe it to less, it's a pager. You can page up and page down using the page up page down key. You can also use the cursor key to go line by line. It also accepts the regular VI commands, which are Control F for forward, Control B for backward, and so on. And if I want to look for processes with the name VDE, I just press the slash key, and then I type VDE, and it will locate and highlight the entries with VDE. So in this case, I do have slurp running, and it is being run with the DHCP option. And I also have a virtual machine running already. I have the client running, and the client's running, with the VDE option too. So I have to be careful not to disable the VDE network. Otherwise I will have to reset or restart the client machine as well. And here's VDE switch itself. I can see exactly how it was started up. It started up with the -t tab 0 option, which means the host has connectivity to the client machine. Okay, so we only have about 33 seconds left for the download to be completed. So let's go ahead and read ahead a little bit of the instruction here. So after we download that file, we have to run this command here. It is tar xzvf-krbsvr. I forgot to type in the extension because the file actually has the extension of .tgz, and that's what we have to do too. The command is almost done. We have 5 seconds left, so let's go ahead and switch to our command prompt here. Okay, the file is downloaded. So what I'll do is I'm just going to use the command X. Okay, let me just explain the different parts of tar. X for extract, Z for the compression format. In this case, it is gzipped, the gzip format. And then V for verify, so they will print out what files are decompressed from the archive file. And then F specifies the following thing is the path to the file that we want to decompress. I have that thing sitting in my temp folder, and the name is krbsvr.tgz. And as soon as you press the enter key, it will decompress the file and show you what is created, or what files are created as a result of running tar. So you can see that the folder krbsvr is created in the process. It has a script to help you start up the virtual machine, and also the image file that goes along with the virtual server. So at this point, we'll go ahead and change our directory to that folder, krbsvr. And before we run the script, it is always a good idea to see what it looks like. And in this case, it's fairly standard. We have kvm-hda to specify the disk image, -net nic VLAN 0 MAC address equals blah 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 to help specify that we want one network interface card, and the MAC address is 545200123488. So you have to make sure that your client does not start up with the same MAC address, because otherwise it just won't work. And then the second part specifies that it specifies how are we connecting this NIC to the outside world, because otherwise you can create a NIC and give it a MAC address, but it doesn't connect to anything. In this case, it connects to the outside world using VDE, and the socket is located as /temp/switch. So you have to make sure that is consistent with the way you set up your VDE also. Okay, so with all of this stuff ready, we'll go ahead and start up the virtual machine. And here we go. I will move the terminal. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get it started, and then I'll move the console to the main screen here. According to the web page here, there's a default password already set up for root. The root password is supposed to be ICE. So we'll go ahead and see if that is really ICE, because I think it is not. Alright, so we'll log in as root and type in the password ICE, and it does not let me log in because that's the wrong password. This is a perfect opportunity to show you how to reset a root password in Debian. And the process goes like this. Now, since we're in a virtual machine, if you press Control-Alt-Delete, it will go ahead and reset your host environment. So don't do that. That's not what you want to do. You want to do Control-Alt-2 on the keyboard, which switches back to the monitor mode. And the monitor console, in the monitor console, you can type send key, and send key Control-Alt-Delete. You have to spell out delete as D-E-L-E-T-E. And what this does is it's going to send the key code Control-Alt-Delete to the virtual machine to reset the virtual machine itself. So I'll press the enter key here, and then quickly switch back Control-Alt-1 to switch back to the virtual machine, because I want to make sure that I catch the grub initial screen. And here it is. So what we want to do is to select recovery mode, and not to press enter. We want to press the key E on the keyboard, E to edit the commands before booting. So that's what we want to do. It's there's quite a bit of stuff here. Insert module, tells us, that in order to start up the machine, we have to, we have to get started with certain modules initially. And this specifies, where is the root file system, and so on. And the entry that we want to modify is this one that starts with Linux itself. It basically specifies how we want to start up our a machine, and you can pass different types of parameters to it. One thing we can change here is to change this RO, which is read only, to RW, which is read write. It's safer to run it as read only first, but in this case I'm going to run it as read write. And then we can also specify shell. Let me make sure that is the case. Well, we have to specify init equals /bin/sh or /bin/bash. So let me explain what that does. Now, if you don't specify init equals something, it will start up with the normal init utility, which switches the run level from 1 to 2 and so on and so forth, which starts up the system normally. On the other hand, if you specify init equals /bin/bash, that means it's not going to start up normally, and instead it will jump into bash, which is the born again shell, initially. And that means it's not going to, it won't have a chance to start up the login interface to ask you for the password in order to log in. It would just start right up with a shell script, with a shell. Which is what we want here, because I have forgotten the password and I want to be able to set the password. That is why we have to switch it to RW, because if I don't switch it to RW, it will start up as read only, and then I have to remount it as read write in order to change my password. So we'll go ahead and press Ctrl X to boot using these new options. And you can see the process, is about the same as before, except it drops us into a prompt immediately without having to log in. And at this point, we can use password PASSWD to reset our password. And I'll just reset it to ball, which is consistent with my other server. And you can see password updated successfully. At this point, we can actually use init to start up the whole system. But just to be safe, we'll go ahead and have it to reboot itself, like that. So what I have just done is to show you, how to reset your password in case you have forgotten your root password. Now it seems fairly insecure because you can do this to just about any Debian machine. But the truth is, you have to be sitting there at the console to catch that initial screen. So you still need physical protection from potential hackers. But other than that, this process is actually fairly safe. You can turn that off too. You can turn off the initial ability to change the shell startup options. But if you did that, then resetting the password is going to take a little bit more work, because you will need to have a recovery disk in order to do that. All right. So what we have here is we are now root at the Kerberos server, and nothing is installed yet at this point. So we'll go ahead and read through the documentation here. The first thing we want to do is to change it to static IP, and so we'll run ifconfig to see what it is. And I believe it is already switched to static. Let me just double check here. So we want to go to /etc/network/interfaces, and it is not using static. It just so happens that it's assigning 10.0.2.20 as the IP address. So we have a few problems here. The first problem is I did run slurp VDE with the DHCP option. And that's not good because I don't want to run static IP and also have DHCP running at the same time, just in case the DHCP assigns the same IP address as a static IP that I have assigned to a machine already. So the best way to do it is to power off both virtual machines. This one is the server, so we'll switch to the client machine here and also restart it. And I think on the client the password is customer, so we'll turn this off too. And then we'll switch to the command prompt. And in the command prompt, I'll just show you again. We do have VDE slurp and VDE run with the --DHCP option, which is not what I want. So the only option I have is to kill this process and then start it up again, but without the --DHCP option. And there are several ways to do it. One way is to kill the process by its process ID. In PS, the process ID is listed. This one has a process ID of 1173. So when we get out, we can say kill 1173. And that does not always kill the process, because sometimes some processes may decide not to get killed using that. Then you have to say kill -9, kill space -9 space, and then the process ID to kill that process. But this time it was successful. So now we can say slurp VDE --daemon, so that we come back to the command prompt, and then we specify the socket -s temp switch, and we do not specify DHCP in this case. And so slurp is now running. It's time to start up the server again, and this time it should not be able to get an IP address because the DHCP server is not running. So we'll go ahead and start this up, and we'll also go ahead and start up the client too. So the client is in the client folder, and we'll go ahead and start that up too. Alright, and let's switch back to the server. Log in as root and run ifconfig, and you can see this time it doesn't give us an IP address, which is normal because we did not specify DHCP when we ran slurp VDE. So now is a good time to give it a static IP. And the quick and easy way to do it is to edit network/interfaces and change this portion here. Instead of DHCP, we say static, and then we specify the address. And it's entirely up to you to assign the address. I'll just assign it as 10.02.20 to be consistent with my notes. And then that mask is 255.255.255.0. And then we have to specify the gateway too. The gateway is going to be 10.0.22. I can't remember whether it should be 2.2 or 2.3. I think it is 2.3. Well, let's check my notes. And it told me to go back to my own instruction to see how to do it, so we'll go ahead and do that. Converting to static IP, and it doesn't say anything about interfaces, so I cannot remember how. Oh, okay, I know what to do. Let's go to our command prompt here and start up a new tab, and then we'll look at the documentation of slurp VDE, because it gives us the default gateway. Okay, the virtual router has an IP address of 10.0.22. So that's exactly what we need. So we'll now switch back to the machine here and specify our gateway to be 10.0.22. That's all that we have to specify. And now we can go ahead and bring the interface down and then bring it back up again. When we bring it back up again, it is using the static IP. And when we run route, it shows that it's using 10.0.2.2 as the default gateway. And we can now try to access a few things. So we'll use ping to go to the power server, just to check the connectivity of the virtual machine. And that's fine, because the ping packets are ICMP packets, and they cannot get out of the virtual switch, and that's why the ping will never be successful. But the fact that it resolved the domain name to 165.196.788 is good. If you really want a confirmation that we have access to the outside world, you can use wget, which gets the default index page of a server. And you can see that we have no problem getting that, but it's you just have to remember to remove the HTML document, because it doesn't really serve us any purpose. So at this point, the server has static IP, and we have to do the same thing to the client machine. The client machine has a root password of customer by default, and then we have to do the same. We have to do the same thing to network/interfaces. And then change DHCP to static, and we just have to make sure that it has a different address. The host environment has an address of 200 already. The virtual server has an address of 20, so we'll just go ahead and assign the usual 15 to the client, and that mask is 255.255.255.0. And the gateway is the same, which is 10.0.2.2. We bring the interface down, and we bring it back up again. Check, and they're all working now. So now it's a good time to ping, and I'll just go do it from the host environment and ping 10.0.2.15, which is the client machine. Operation not permitted. Okay. So ping is working to our client machine, and it is also working with our host machine, our virtual host, virtual Kerberos server. So everything is good. The network connectivity is good now. And we'll go ahead and go to the next step. Oh, check that resolve.conf has 10.0.2.3 as the DNS server. Pretty sure that's already done, because when it ran with DHCP, it got the resolve.conf configured like that already, but it doesn't hurt to check. So we'll go ahead and check resolve.conf on the Kerberos server. It's done correctly. And now we check the client machine. etc resolve. So they are all configured correctly. The next thing is we have to specify the Kerberos server's host name, and we have to change the file called hosts, like that. So we'll go ahead and do that. So it's in etc/hosts. And right now we have this local address as our KRB server. We'll go ahead and change that to 10.0.2.20. And we'll also change that to krbsvr.test.org as per the instruction here. And then we have to run hostname -fqdn, fully qualified domain name, and it is krbsvr. So everything is good on the server. At this point, we move forward to install the server packages. It's really just a matter of following the instructions. Now this part is important because normally we set up Aptitude not to ask tedious little questions, and we let the installer decide the default. But we want to change that now. We want it to ask us about all the details too. So the way to do it is to run dpkg reconfigure dabconf, and dialog is fine. We can keep using that one. And the next one, now we specify ignore questions with a priority less than, and we want to specify low. That basically means it's going to ask us about every little thing when it configures packages. So we press OK, we get back into the command prompt. Alright. So now we can go ahead and install multiple packages. This shows you, the flexibility of the aptitude command. I think apt-get, has the same attribute. Is that we can install multiple packages using a single command. In this case, this part here is kind of cryptic. KRB5- is outside of the curly brace, and what that means is, that part is common to all the packages that we are installing. But whatever is inside, we can now specify KDC as one suffix of KRB5-, and then the other suffix is admin-server, which is another suffix of KRB5. So we are now installing two packages, KRB5-KDC and KRB5-admin server. So we'll go ahead and run that command. Now, because I'm doing this using the console of the server, I can't really copy and paste, but that's actually good because when you type things in by hand, you actually remember a little bit better than when you copy and paste it. There we go. So apt-get is installing. It may not be successful because this distribution has been around for 2 years, so some of these packages may have been updated already. Nope, everything is fine. And now Kerberos is asking us for the RAM. The RAM is entirely up to you to decide, but most of the time it is good to be consistent with your domain. If you're setting up for a domain called test.com, it's usually good to specify your Kerberos RAM as test.com too. In this case, I use test.org, so I'll stay consistent with my homework assignment instruction here and specify test.org, and it's all in uppercase. Now remember, the uppercase part is a convention of Kerberos, but it's not a requirement. But we'll go ahead and stay consistent with that. So we click OK. Typically, clients find Kerberos server for their default RAM in the domain system, in the domain name system. However, the Kerberos server for your RAM do not appear to be listed either in the domain name system or the Kerberos configuration file. You may add them to the blah 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 blah. Do we want to add locations of default Kerberos server to krb5.conf? And we'll go ahead and specify yes. And the Kerberos server for our RAM is going to be krbsvr.test.org. Administrative server for your Kerberos RAM is going to be exactly the same. So we'll specify krbsvr.test.org. Create the Kerberos KDC configuration automatically, and as the instruction says, use defaults for all other questions. So we'll just take the default of yes. And setting up a Kerberos RAM, this package contains the administrative tools required to run the Kerberos master server. Does not automatically set up a Kerberos RAM, and it can be done by new RAM and so on. So this is just instructional to tell us what to do. So we'll press enter. Kadmin-d serves requests to add, modify, or remove principals. It is required by the K-password program, blah blah blah, and we'll take the default too. And we'll also take the default here. That's just for the man pages. And now it's all done. Now the kadmin-d is going to fail because we haven't really set up a RAM yet, and that's in step 5. In step 5, the KRB configuration has no RAM database. We can initialize the database using the command krb5 new RAM. You'll be prompted a password. Make sure you remember the password. If this step fails, you probably did not edit /etc/hosts correctly. So let's go ahead and give it a try, and we will run krb5 underscore new RAM. And it's loading random data right now. Alright. Okay, I think I forgot one thing because I pressed enter one too many times. So let's go ahead and make sure that we enter the password correctly this time. It's just taking a little longer, and I pressed the enter key to see whether the machine is was still alive, and it took it as the password. And we can look ahead a little bit of the notes here. So after this step, after we specify the password, we have to go ahead and change krb5.conf, and then we have to add these two lines. What we are doing is we're equating domain names to the actual the RAMs, and that's why it makes sense, to choose the same name, because otherwise, these two entries will be different names. And then after that step, we'll be ready to. I'm just moving the virtual machine out of the view here a little bit. We'll edit this file and remove the pound sign on the line that reads pound admin or asterisk admin asterisk. And then after that, we'll go ahead and restart both server software. The first one is KRB5 KDC, which is the key distribution center, and then the second one is admin server, which is the administrative server, which actually did not start up correctly to begin with because we did not have a RAM. And it is still loading random data, so we'll keep that window going. And then after that, we have to add principals. If you forget what principals are, a principal is basically an entry in the Kerberos database. What it does is it represents an account that can be authenticated using KDC. And we're just going to read ahead of time because the virtual machine is still taking its time to start up. So we'll go ahead and add a regular user, and we'll just call that user. We'll add admin, which is a root user. In this case, excuse me, I take it back. We'll add a user called root, but the role of root is admin. And this part is kind of important because we have to make sure that root has that special ability as an administrator. This part here is interesting because we are not adding a principal. We are not adding an end user. We are actually adding a service in this case. So we're adding a service to the RAM, so the service itself can also be authenticated. And in this case, we are choosing a random key because there's no need for us to actually specify a key for a service, because supposedly nobody should enter that key, and that should be automatic. And then the next one is kt add the krb5 key host / krb server. It exports the random key generated in the previous step to a file, so that this way the same key can be distributed to the actual server, running the service itself, because the key has to be shared. And then the next step is list principals, so we can see all these principals that we have added. I think there are 3 of these that we have added, and then we quit to get out of the administrative program. And let's go ahead and check on our, oh, there we go, our virtual machine. So if your virtual machine looks like it's locked up and doesn't do anything, click it and then just move your mouse around. That will generate some random events to help your program get started. So here we'll enter the master key. I'm doing a very bad thing to use the same password as my root password here. So supposedly we should not do that. Alright, so that step is done, and now we can add the principals. I'm just moving the windows so that we can see both the command and also the console, the virtual machine console. So we'll go ahead and run kadmin, and we are going to run it as a local version. So we have to specify .local when we run kadmin. Alright, so we're going to add the principal user and give the principal user a password. I'll just use user as the user password. And we'll add the principal root admin, which is already existing. Warning, no policy specified for root admin, defaulting to no policy. And we can enter a new password here, and I'm going to use the same password as root itself. We'll add another principal. This time we specify random key, and we are specifying the surface KRBSVR. And you can see that this time it does not ask us for a password because we specify random key in this case. And then we'll run ktadd -k etc krb5.keytab key table, and we are specifying that we just want the key of the KRB server itself. This is for the surface. So we'll go ahead and press the enter key, and we'll go ahead and list our principals. Oops, I just had a typo. List PRINCS list principals. So now we have all these principles done already. Some are built in and we did not have to add those, and some are the ones that we just added a little bit earlier. And now that we are done, we press quit, and then we have to run klist-5 to confirm no tickets have been issued. So we run klist-5, and it says no credential cache found. And if you want to find out what -5 means, you can do a man on or read the man page of klist, and we can see if I remember correctly, -5 means version 5, but it doesn't show here. If you just run klist, it gives you exactly the same result. Okay, so now the instruction here says try to authenticate as the user using the command kinit-user. What it does is it initiates the first few steps of the authentication process. We are not going to use a surface server in this case, so it's just going to authenticate the user, and it's doing this locally. So we'll go ahead and say kinit-user. It asks for the password user, and the password is user itself. It doesn't do anything to confirm. It doesn't give you a fanfare and say yes, you have just logged in. It just does not give you an error as the process. So to confirm that, we have to use klist-5, and now it shows that we have a ticket, and the ticket is valid for, wow, look at this. The ticket is valid for 10 hours, and the surface principal is KRB TGT. Remember what TGT means? It is a ticket granting ticket. That's the surface that we have a ticket to access. So for 10 hours, we don't have to authenticate again. I mean, user is now authenticated in this system for 10 hours. Okay, onto our notes. Going forward, install and test KRB RSH service. Okay. And to do that, we have to install the package called krb5-rsh-server. So we'll go ahead and do that. Aptitude install krb5-rsh, which is the abbreviation of remote shell. And we are only installing the server of that. The client will install it on another machine. It will bring in these additional packages. That's fine. We'll go ahead and do that. And it's done. When it's done, we have to run etc/init.d openbsd-inetd restart because it does not automatically start up once it changes the configuration of inetd. So we'll go ahead and run that /etc/initd/openbsd-inetd restart. Now my note, or the instruction of the homework assignment also says very specifically that RSH by itself is very insecure, and but the KRB version is secure. So that's why normally you don't want to run a remote shell server, but if it is KRB or Kerberos based, then it's secure. And the next thing we want to do is to run the remote shell client locally. And we have to install krb5-clients first. So we'll go ahead and do that. KRB5-clients is basically a bundle deal. Instead of giving you one client at a time, it gives you different clients. So you have a RCP for remote copy, RLogin for remote login, RShell for remote shell, and also FTP installed all at the same time. Now FTP normally is a very, very insecure protocol, and you should not use FTP. But if it is under Kerberos 5, that means at least the authentication part is done securely, so the username and the password are transmitted in an encrypted form, or in this case the username is transmitted in clear text, but the password was never transmitted. Okay, so after that step, we can now issue the command rsh -x -pn krb svr -l user and try to log into the user account. And let's see if we actually have a user account here. And we do have a default user account already, because if we don't have a default user account, then even though we have a principal called user, the login will still fail because we really do not have a place or an account for user. So we'll go ahead and run that command right here. I can scroll this up a little bit, then we can see both the command and also the console at the same time. And you can see that I just logged in as user. It did not prompt me for a password, and that's because I have the ticket already, and this is good for 10 hours. So anytime from now to about 8 o'clock tonight, when I try to log in, I do not need to specify my password again. This part, don't worry about the TypeScript. We'll figure out another way to do this, because it's really hard for me to read the TypeScript. So we're not going to do it this way. And now we can save the virtual machine if you want to. And I have not been running a snapshot anyway, so all of these changes are quote-unquote permanent. Alright, so we'll go ahead and power off the server. Now at this point, we haven't really done anything on the client. Okay, the client machine, we haven't done anything on the client machine yet, and that's something that we are going to do with LDAP plus Kerberos. Now this one is far more involved than the previous one, and all it does is to say refer to the module that talks about LDAP and Kerberos. And that usually is a bad sign because it means the instruction is complicated enough that I put it into its own documentation. And this is the one. This is the documentation for LDAP and Kerberos at the same time. So now we have to read through this instruction here, and you definitely need to read through these sections here. But instead of reading through these sections, I'm going to start with the example or schema for network login. Doing it. Okay, there we go. So I'm starting with section 6, but you should not. Okay, you really should start to read. You should read the first 5 sections to understand the concept, because otherwise you can follow all these steps and do everything here, but as soon as you have to do something that is not a part of what I have just described, you may have problems understanding how to do it, because the concepts are very important in this case. So we'll go ahead and install those packages. Now, it's not a bad idea to double check to see how much space we have left. We have 1.3 gigabytes left on the virtual disk, so we have plenty of space. I would not have to worry about running out of space here. So we'll install the LDAP daemon, the utilities, and also lib LDAP2, LDAP2. Press the enter key, and we'll go ahead and install all of these packages. Omit Open LDAP server configuration, and we specify no. Domain name server, DNS domain name. This automatically constructs the root entry of the LDAP tree to be consistent in this module. We'll specify test.org, which is also consistent with the previous part of setting up the Kerberos server. But in this case, it's all in lowercase. It is actually case insensitive because the domain name is not case sensitive. Organization name, org name, and this part is really not important. We just have to say something. Okay. Administrative password. This is the password for the LDAP administrator. So once again, you have to remember this password, and it is a bad idea to use the same password for all the different administration in the system. Okay, because if you did that, then if someone compromises the system to get one password, then that person will automatically gain access to everything. So that's the bad idea. Database backend to use will use the default, which is HDB. Do you want the database to be removed when slapd or the LDAP daemon is purged? We'll go ahead and use the default, which is no. Allow LDAP v2 protocol, and we'll just take the default of no as well here. And you can see that I'm just following my instructions in my own writing. And the next step is to edit the configuration file, and we have to specify these 2 lines. So I'm using VI. You should use Nano if you don't like VI. That's the only other plain text editor that is already installed. So the first thing we want to do is to uncomment base, but also at the same time change DC, which is I cannot remember what DC stands for, and that's why I should read my own notes too. I just cannot remember what it was. Okay, so we have to change the DCs to test and org. That forms the base. In other words, every other item in this database will start with org and then test. But the way we specify these things is reversed, which means the most specific detail is listed on the left, and then the most general item like org is on the right hand side. The URI, we have to change that too. So we're going to change that to LDAP / 10.02.20. I believe the domain name will work just as well. If you specify KRB SVR, or krbsvr.test.org. Those would work too because we have the hosts file done already. So we save the file. The first line helps to save some typing, and then the second line tells us where to find the actual LDAP server. And now we have to modify slapd.conf. Okay, so we'll go ahead. This is the actual daemon to serve LDAP. The other one is generic, and this one is the actual daemon. Let's see. Alright, so this part has changed a little bit, okay, because they used to have a file called slap.conf, and that file is no longer around. Instead, what it does is using a directory for all the editing. Alright, so what we'll do is we have to change the instruction a little bit here. And what I'll do is I'm going to show you another way of doing this. Because what the instruction says, locate the line that says index object class EQ. And so what we'll do is to find out whether there are files with that object class as a part of the name. And yes, we do have a lot of those. And so we have to make it a little bit more specific and just say index. Okay, we don't have a file that has index object class EQ, and append the following line as a new line and save the file. Index UID EQ. In other words, we are just identifying another index. And let's see if there are any files with index in it, and there are no such files. Alrighty. I'm just going to let this. Okay, let me look for one more thing, which is UID, and let's see if any file specifies UID, and there are plenty of files specifying UID as a part of it. So I think it is already taken care of. So let's go ahead and just restart the server. So we are now in this step here. We are going to restart slapd. Stop it first, and then we re-index the tree. Okay. And then we have to do a shown. The warning is exactly what this means, because we ran it as root, which changes the ownership of that file automatically. So we have to change the ownership back to OpenLDAP. So we're changing both the user owner and also the group owner to OpenLDAP. And then the location of that is it will be all the files under /var/lib/LDAP. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and restart LDAP. And we're done with this step. Moving on to the next section. Now we have to add entries to LDAP. Now to run this, we have to be, it's going to be a little bit tedious. Create a single text file with the last 4 entry definitions concatenated. Make sure you leave at least one blank line between the entries. You can create this file anywhere you want, and so on and so forth. And we'll keep this page here, and then we'll go ahead and go back up a little bit, because we have to look at this example. This is an example that has all the entries that we want. So we'll go ahead and go back to this part and run those commands. So the first thing we want to do is to stop the slapd server. So we just started it, and now we have to stop it again. And then the next thing we want to do is to create the initial.ldif file first. So we'll go ahead and create that file to begin with. initial.ldif, and the content of that file is in the long example, and you can see there's a little bit of typing here. But as I type, I'm just going to explain, what those words mean. Okay. DN. This is the distinctive name, which means this is a unique ID to identify this particular item. DC, I just cannot remember what DC means. I'm pretty sure DC attribute is a domain component. In other words, these are part of the domain name. Object class, remember, is a template, so we are specifying that this particular item should follow the template of top. So, and then the other one is DC object, a domain component object, and then the other one is organization, and then our organization is test.org, and another the DC is test2. And it is also explained here, I cannot omit the last DC entry here because it is required by one or more of the object class. I would suspect that DC object is the one that requires that we have a DC attribute. Remember, these DC entries are for the attribute DN. This is its own attribute. Okay, so that's fine. Moving on to the next one. So we have to leave an empty line between entries. The next one has a distinctive name of CN. In this case, CN stands for common name, and this is for our administrator. And then the other part, DC, it needs to be specified because it is part of the domain. So everything needs to be of the domain test.org. And then we have object class as simple security object, and we have organizational role. So make sure when you type, you type carefully, because if you have a typo, then it's not going to take it. CN common name is admin, and we need a description. And this is our LDAP administrator. So now I just created an entry for a particular user in the system. And then we have the next one. DN OU. OU stands for organization unit, and this time we have to use uppercase people. In other words, this is a container. This is not an actual person or a user, but it is the container of all the quote-unquote people of this organization. And you can see from the object class, this is a organizational unit as opposed to the previous one, which is an organizational role. Okay, and multiple people, multiple users can assume that role. In other words, in our system, we can see the root assumes the role of admin, but you can also assign additional people to have the role of admin for our LDAP server. Okay, so now we are moving on to group here. The difference between people and group is people is kind of like our the users that we have dealt with in the password file, and group deals with the groups that we have in the groups file. So these are parallel to the organization of users and groups when we don't have LDAP. So we'll go ahead and just finish typing here. Object class is organizational unit. OU, organizational unit is group. Okay, now that we have specified a role that is mandatory, we have specified the container unit, one is people to store all the users, and the other one is group to store all the groups. Now we can define actual entries, and each entry will have a people part and also a group part. As we type, I'll illustrate that. Okay, so we're dealing with this part here. DN is common name instead of organization unit. This is common name is newbie to represent a newbie user. Organizational unit is group, which basically means it belongs to the group. DC is test, DC is org. In other words, we're specifying test.org as the domain name. CN, common name is newbie. GID number is 10,000. Object class top, object class POSIX group. What we have just done is this is equivalent to one line in /etc/group in the more local setting. We have just created a group, and the name of the group is newbie, and the GID, the group ID, is 10,000. Next, we'll create the actual user account. So here we have DN UID for user ID is newbie. OU, organizational unit, is people. In other words, we are not specifying a group anymore. We specify an end user account in this case. And the domain is test.org. UID is newbie. So you can see that a lot of these items are duplicated because the domain name, or excuse me, the distinctive name needs to refer to the attributes. CN is newbie. This is in uppercase. The common name is you can change the case. SN is newbie, and let me just move the instruction forward here. GID number, UID first. Okay, let's go. UID number is 10,000. GID number is 10,000. They do not have to agree, but in most cases it's just handy to assign the same number as the UID and the GID of a user. Object class top, object class person. So that's different from the previous one. The previous one is a POSIX group, and this time it is a user. And object class POSIX account. Once again, the difference is this is an individual account. The previous one is a group. Object class shadow account. And then we have login shell. These are the entries that you normally find in /etc/PASSWD. And in this case, we specify bash for this particular user, which means when this user logs in, the default shell is born again shell. Now, if you don't want somebody to be able to log in, you're just creating an account for something else, or you don't want to activate the account just yet, you can specify the login shell as false. Now, when you specify that, the user account will be created, it will be represented, and you can even authenticate against that user account. But the user cannot log in. There's no login shell. But in this case, we do want this user to be able to log in, so we'll specify bash. And then we have home directory to be set up as /home newbie. And of course, we actually do not have that folder set up yet, but we'll just say that let's say that that's already set up. And you should double check and make sure that your file does not have any typos. So we go ahead and save this file and then get back to our previous instruction. Okay, so now that we have this file created, we'll go ahead and use /add to add our entries to that LDAP database. So we'll specify exactly that node location. And is it it is complaining. It's complaining about key pair already exists. Cannot add entry because it already exists. That's fine. Could not parse entry on line 8. On line 18. Entry is missing. Entry 4. Alright, so we have done we have made a few mistakes here. It's complaining about the first one is already existing, so there's no need to recreate it. So we'll go ahead and delete that part and do this again, and should not complain about that again. Invalid entry cn equals admin dc equals test. Oh, okay, I just had a typo there. Alright, so I put a dot instead of an equal symbol. So we'll go ahead and run that again. And here it's complaining. Okay, let me scroll back a little bit. To scroll back, if you want to scroll back and forth, you can press a shift and then the page up and page down key when you're using the terminal. That gives you the ability to go to page up and page down when you are in the command prompt. Okay, so here it's complaining that object class simple security object requires attribute user password, and object class simple security object requires attribute user password. So it's complaining about user password. The database entry exists already for one of the items. Could not add entry. The key pair already exists. Okay. When it complains it already exists, that's fine. It's not a big problem. Key pair already exists. Key pair already exists. Already exist. So everything is already done, and we can now run the next command to restart the daemon, restart the LDAP server. So we'll go ahead and run this. It starts up, and now we have the actual server running. And once the server is running, we'll run LDAP search-x, and it lists all the entries that we have in the LDAP directory. And it's a good time to check and make sure that we have all the entries that we want. Okay, so we have the organization itself, the domain itself as the top organization. We have admin as a role. Okay. Oh, I just skipped that part. We have admin as an organizational role. We have people as an organizational unit. We have newbie as a group. We have people as an organization unit, and then we have newbie as a person. So we do have all the entries that we have added previously, and now it's moving on. We can now move on to the next slide. And okay, now that LDAP is up and running, we are not using it at all. That's because when you normally log in, you're not looking up the LDAP table, and that is controlled by the nsswitch.conf file. When you look into this file, you can see password, group, and shadow, which controls how we log in. They're all using compat. It does not specify to use LDAP. So what we need to do is to change these to include LDAP, and append that to the end of those lines. And I just missed a few steps here. Okay. This is an older instruction, so in the past, it only specifies files, but now, it specifies compat, and we have to change that too. On the client side, which can be the same machine running the server, we have to install LDAP-utils. So let's do that first, locally to the server, because if it doesn't work on the server itself, it's not going to work from a remote client. If it does work on the server, then we'll go ahead and do the same thing on a separate client, which is our client virtual machine. So we'll go ahead and say aptitude install LDAP-utils. The next step is trivial because our LDAP.conf is already on the same machine, and there's no need to copy that. To add LDAP as an entry to resolve names, you have to install the libnss LDAP-d package. So we'll go ahead and install that. Aptitude install libnss LDAP-d as a package. So we'll go ahead and install that package. It's already identifying our the resource, the URI, as 10.02.20, which is correct. And the server base, search base is this, which basically means you don't have to specify blah 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 .test.org, blah 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 .test.org all the time. It is already there by default. If the database requires a login for normal lookup, enter the name. The value should be specified as a DN distinguished name, and I don't think we have to enter that. And when asked about name surfaces to configure, we'll specify group. Okay, so leave this one blank, and we'll specify no for TLS to encrypt the connection, and name surfaces to configure, we have to specify group here. And I believe password needs to be specified too, as well as shadow. So all of these should be specified, even though the instruction only specifies group here. Okay, so click OK. We'll have all of these installed. PAM profiles to enable. We want to enable Unix type and LDAP authentication. This part has changed since this note was written. We do not want to specify LDAP authentication because we want to leave that part to Kerberos later on. So we'll just specify, we uncheck that part. Alright, so we got everything installed. The next question is we want to take a quick look at nss-ldapd.conf. Oops, I think I just got the wrong name. Nope. nss- oh, there's no such file. So the way they configure this stuff has changed. So now we take a look at nsswitch, etc nsswitch.conf, and you can see the LDAP was added automatically to it. We do not have to do it by hand anymore. Use the following command to confirm that newbie is reported there. So we'll go ahead and say ID newbie, and it identifies newbie as a user. Okay, UID, GID, and groups. So they're all done correctly. Alright, so everything is done locally, and we have LDAP up and running, but we have also specified not to use LDAP for authentication. In other words, we are not using LDAP for password authentication. We did not even specify passwords for newbie. So What we need to do now is to specify that, and we have to add additional entries. These are PAM modules to get that to work. So we'll have to aptitude install KRB5 user, because we need that package. It's already installed when we installed the KRB5-utils. And krb5.conf, we are not going to copy it because we are using the same machine, just so that we can prove that we can work on this machine first, that actually is the server. And then we have to go to /etc pam.d common account. Okay, /etc pam, which is a pluggable authentication module, and common account, which specifies how do we authenticate to to all surfaces right here. Authentication settings common to all surfaces, and we want to make sure that we have KRB5 specified somewhere. Oh, I forgot to install that. It's libpam-krb5. So let's do that first. Aptitude install libpam-krb5. Oh, I just had a typo here. There we go. Okay, pluggable authentication modules determine how authentication, authorization, and password changing are handled on the system, as well as allowing configuration of additional actions to take when starting user sessions. Some PAM modules packages provide profiles that can be used to automatically adjust the behavior of all PAM using applications, such as login, on the system. Please indicate which of these behaviors you wish to enable. And we want Kerberos authentication. We want the usual Unix, which is local authentication. We do not want LDAP authentication. So this is really cool because the package, when it's installed, automatically adds the entry. But it doesn't hurt to take a look at these files just to make sure that it is done correctly. So now we are here. And you can see that account required PAM Kerberos 5.so is already installed here, but the minimum user ID is 1000, so we'll just add 10 to it, and the rest we'll just leave it alone. Okay. And then we'll take a look at common auth. These are authentication settings common to all surfaces. And we want to see if KRB5 is also specified here. And it is. Okay, auth KRB5. Once again, we have to set the minimum UID to 1000. Excuse me. The next one is password, which has to do with how passwords can be changed. So we'll go take a look at common password and look for KRB5 again. Once again, it is specified already, and we'll change UID to 1000, minimum UID to 10,000, not 1000. And then we'll take a look at the last one, which is session. Okay, so this is session-related module common to all surfaces. KRB5 is already specified here, but once again, the minimum UID should be 10,000 and not 1000. We jump from 1000 to 10,000 so that we can still have local accounts starting at 1000, but all the LDAP-based accounts will start at 10,000. Alright, so that is all specified. To test this, we have to create a principal newbie in Kerberos. So we'll use kadmin, and since we are still local to the server, we can just run the local version. So we'll say kadmin.local, and authenticating as principal user, and since when I specified this, I did not enter a password, so it's in already. And it will go ahead and add the principal. We use add PRINCS to add a principal. In this case, we're adding newbie as a principal. Unknown request, add principal. Okay, add PRINC, and I give it a name, newbie, and we specify the password as newbie. Alright, we are done with that step. Quit, and now we can try to log in. But before we do that, log out as root and log in as newbie. If it's configured correctly, the authentication should succeed. But because there's no home folder set up for newbie, it will just complain and default the home to the / or the root directory. So we'll go ahead and see if that works. So we log out as root, and we log in as newbie, specify the password, and it did exactly what this is specifying. So locally everything works. Now we have to do this again, and this time we have to use the other approach. So this is fine. This is on the server side. Starting on section 8 is the client side. So now we have to switch to the client, which is sleeping, because there was nothing to do here. And then we have to do exactly the same thing on the client and see if that works. Alright, Linux uses NSS to identify the alternative, blah 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 blah. So we'll go ahead and install LDAP utils first. So we will say aptitude install LDAP-utils. And then we have to copy ldap.conf from the other file. Alright. That is actually quite simple because we can use SCP. We have to make sure the server has OpenSSH installed already. So let's get out of the newbie account and log in as root again, and run netstat tlnp. If you see 22, that means okay, it's not there, so SSH has not been enabled yet. So we'll go ahead and say aptitude install OpenSSH-server. So we're just so that it's easier to transfer files from the server back to the client. Alright, so that's all installed. And now we can do this step here. We want to transfer the ldap.conf file, copy that from the server back to the client. Okay, to do that, you just have to say SCP, and it doesn't have to be the root account. It is usually not safe to be able to log in as root. So you can specify any account, on the other side. In this case, I'll just use, user at, and then you specify the IP address. It's 220. Specify colon to separate the username and the domain IP address from the file path. In this case, the file path is etc/ldap/ldap.conf, and we want to copy that to our own LDAP directory. In fact, we want it to have exactly the same name, so we'll go ahead and do this. I have forgotten the user password on the other side, so I think it's like 3 heads or something like that. Yep, it is. Alright, so now we have ldap.conf copied. It doesn't hurt to double check. ls-l etc ldap.conf is already here. And then we have to install libnss-ldapd. Okay, so we'll go ahead and say, you cannot see this part, but I'm just typing aptitude install libnss-ldapd. and it's confirming the URI. It's getting that from the ldap.conf file, so all of these we can confirm. And now we can specify what services we want to enable. We want to enable group. We want to enable password. We also want to enable shadow. So those are the three we want to enable. So we click OK. And NS switch is automatically reconfigured. We can always double check. It doesn't hurt to double check and make sure that LDAP is added to all three entries. Okay, so that's perfectly fine. Alright, so we can now run ID newbie on the client to see if we have proper connectivity to the LDAP server, and everything works. So we're ready for the last step again. And for the last step to happen, we have to install krb5-user as well as libpam krb5. So we'll go ahead and install both of those packages. First of all, we install krb5-user. Default Kerberos 5 version 5 RAM is tes.org, but this time remember is in uppercase. The Kerberos server is 10.02.20. Administrative server is the same, so that's 10.02.20 again. Alright, and then we have to install libpam krb5. So once again, we run aptitude install libpam-krb5. Oh, it does not ask us for the details anymore because I forgot to change the detail level of the default installer. So this time we do have to double check and make sure that those entries are added properly. KRB5. Yep, it is specified here. And it's also including LDAP, so we have to delete some of these entries. So we want to enable KRB5, but we want to disable LDAP. So any entry that has LDAP in it, we have to disable that. And then we just have to edit those files, one by one. Common auth password is the next one. Look for KRB5 and look for LDAP. We want to get rid of the LDAP portion because we are not using LDAP for authentication. It's always safe to disable things that we are not using. And then session. Once again, KRB5 is here. We want to specify UID to be 1000. And then we look for LDAP and remove that. It's also using winbind here, which we probably should disable as well. I think the first one is actually account. We haven't done that one yet, so we'll specify that. Look for KRB5. It does have KRB5, change minimum UID, and then we want to remove the LDAP entry. Okay. Alright, so that's all done. We have already added the principal newbie, but it doesn't hurt to do this. Okay, so let's see what happens when we say kadmin here. We want to, because it automatically logs into the Kerberos server from the client, and the root password, unfortunately, is the same as the local password. And we can try the same thing. We can even try to add newbie as an account, and we'll specify the password to be newbie. And it says operation add privilege while creating newbie requires add privilege. So this is interesting because it's specifying that when I run it remotely, I don't have the privilege of adding. So if I try to add another user, okay, newbie, no policy specified, defaulting to no policy. So I'm just going to specify the password here, and it says that we cannot do it because we don't have the add privilege to create that, and that's because we are running remotely. So it's time to quit. And the moment of truth is this part here. We'll try to log in remotely to the other machine and see if we can. Oh, excuse me. We want to log in locally to see if we can log in as newbie. So let's log out on the client machine and then log in as newbie. And we can still log in as newbie. Now, of course, we have a problem here. Let me show you what the problem is. And let me log out from the remote machine and log in as newbie on the other machine as well. Now, we have logged in at the Kerberos and LDAP server, and logged in as the on the local client. On both machines, there's no home folder corresponding to newbie. That's fine. We can fix that later. We can always create that folder. But the problem is that folder is going to be local to these machines. So the Kerberos server will have its own newbie home directory, and the client machine is going to have its own local client, local newbie home folder. That's not good because maybe we want to use the same folder, regardless of which machine we are on. This is where Samba and other network file systems come in handy, because now we can run Samba on maybe yet another server, and on both servers, on both the Kerberos SV server and also the client machine, we can now mount the Samba mount point for newbie as the home folder, and we just have to make sure that that machine, the machine that's running Samba, is also configured to use LDAP and also use Kerberos, so that we have secure login, and we also use the same user ID and the GID of 10,000. So when we do it that way, that means you can now have 20 different boxes as quote-unquote potential servers for a user to log in. But regardless of which machine a user actually logs in, the files are all shared. They're actually all accessing from the same file server, and so that means each of these so-called servers for people to log in can be very thin, because it doesn't really need any local storage. All the storage will be on the Samba server. All the user account information will be on the Kerberos/LDAP server. So this is how we can manage a huge network of many machines with many users, and still be able to organize everything in a way that is easy for the administrator to handle. So I hope you find this walkthrough useful, and I'll just go through one last thing. Okay, I keep saying one last thing and one last thing, but this really is the last thing. Okay, so on the Kerberos server, I'll just go ahead and show you how to create the necessary home folder for newbie. So what you want to do is not this. Okay, add user is a bad idea, because we don't want newbie to be identified locally as a user. So we don't want to do that. We'll just go ahead and create the home folder, home/newbie, like that. Now, when we do that, it's not going to work well, because it's going to have the permission of root. So what we need to do here is to change the ownership of newbie. So we'll go ahead and use should-own, and we'll change the ownership to 10,000 to home newbie, and do a ls-ld home newbie. And it is identified as newbie. That's because we already have LDAP up and running, and LDAP was able to map the UID and the GID of 10,000 to the actual name of newbie. So that's good. And we can do the same thing locally on client. Now remember, we are now setting up a different home directory on each machine, which is probably not what you want to do when you have this kind of setup. But we'll go ahead and do that anyway. So we'll say make a directory home newbie, and permission denied. Oh, that's because I'm newbie. We'll go ahead and log in as root again and do the same thing and use shown. Now because LDAP is running, I can actually say ID newbie. Since LDAP is running already, we should be able to use the username newbie instead of 10,000. I could have done that with the other one too. So we'll go ahead and do this and make sure that it is done correctly. Alright, so now when we log out and log in again as newbie, okay. Okay, newbie and newbie. Now it logs in and it has its own folder. PWD is showing that we are correctly in the home folder. So basically this is just fixing the last thing that reported an error. So as it turns out, it's actually easier now to go through all these steps compared to 2 years ago, because the initial setup, the script for the initial setup, actually takes care of most of the issues that we had to edit manually before. So the instruction still works. It's just that we don't have to follow it to the teeth anymore. And this concludes the walkthrough. Basically, I have just done your homework assignment. I'll see you later in class today and see if you guys have any questions at that time. Thanks for watching.